Hi, everyone. My name is Gina Ramirez. I'm so excited today to have this conversation with my awesome colleague, Valeria, about moving, transitioning away from fossil fuels in Chicago and, creating sort of a healthy boundaries in our home and the cost saving measures that electrification would have on Chicago residents. So we're going to take a deeper dive today on this electrification analysis that Team NRDC has been working on with all of these amazing colleagues in the Chicagoland area. So welcome, Valeria. Can you let our listeners know who you are and what you've been working on at NRDC?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so excited to talk to you about this today, Gina. So my name is Valeria Rincon. I work for our Midwest Climate and Clean Energy team, and I focus a lot on building decarbonization issues, which is just a fancy way of saying getting carbon emissions out of buildings. And I do that in Illinois and Michigan and a lot of work specifically in Chicago. So I'm excited to talk about this report, which covers electrification in residential homes for Chicago.
Amazing. So let's just start out by asking, what are the findings of the electrification analysis and the implications of these cost saving opportunities for Chicagoans?
Thanks, Gina. That's a really great question. So I might take a step back and just kind of do a quick overview of what our analysis looked at. So our analysis looked at what the cost savings and the carbon emissions reductions potential would be of electrifying new and existing residential buildings in Chicago. And what electrification means is it basically just means swapping out fossil fuel powered appliances like gas powered appliances, like a gas furnace that you might use for space heating, or a gas stove that you might use for cooking, or a gas powered clothes dryer that of course you would use for clothes drying, with efficient electric alternatives like heat pumps and induction stoves, and an electric resistance powered clothes dryer, or a heat pump clothes dryer, because those also exist. And essentially they're just electric powered devices that would serve the same needs, but they don't produce on-site carbon emissions. So they're healthier, they're cleaner, they're also more efficient than their gas powered counterparts, so they're in the long term more affordable to operate. And our analysis found that by switching out your gas powered appliances to efficient electric appliances, Chicagoans can save thousands of dollars. And this is because of the high cost of gas, both in terms of like the gas itself, but also the cost of maintaining the gas distribution system in Chicago. Both of those things are really high. And so we found that electrifying appliances in residential homes could save the average customer nearly $11,000. And more, depending on your specific situation, in total energy costs for people that live in currently built homes in Chicago. For Chicagoans that would potentially move into a newly built all electric home, the savings would be even greater, upwards of $15,000. And that's all without factoring all of these exciting incentive opportunities that are now available, through things that have passed, like the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act is a newly passed law at the federal level that includes building electrification rebates and tax credits for consumers that can help them pay for the cost of purchasing an efficient electric appliance like a heat pump. These rebates are available specifically for low to moderate income homes. And when we factor in those additional savings, we find that low income homes in Chicago could potentially save an additional $11,000 if you live in a single family home, and save upwards of $9,000 if you live in an apartment. But our analysis didn't just stop there. We found that you didn't necessarily have to electrify all of the appliances in your home to see significant energy savings. Even just electrifying your space heating can provide significant energy savings. And the reason for that is that space heating is what makes up roughly 3/4 of gas use in homes. So electrifying your space heating and getting those energy efficiency savings by using more efficient equipment is can lead to some very substantial savings. I think upwards of $7,000 for consumers. So in general, our analysis found electrification to be very cost effective and a huge opportunity that's going to save Chicagoans a lot of money, and will also help to save the planet.
Wow, those are some massive numbers.
Yes.
7,000, 9,000, 11,000. When you have a lot of children, that can really kind of, and you're living paycheck to paycheck, that can like make or break your bank account. Especially with these long, harsh winters in Chicago. We're in the midst of it. We're in January right now. I know everyone has been kind of complaining about their gas bills being the highest they've ever seen. So can you kind of explain that a little bit? Why are gas bills continuing to increase in Chicago?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And before I dive into that, I do want to just provide a little bit of a clarification, on what I just said. The numbers that I was throwing out there are sort of long-term savings. So our analysis looked at the savings over the course of a 20-year time period, and those are the savings that you would see over the full time period. However, what's really exciting is that we even see electrification savings in the first year of electrification. So even in the first year, households could potentially save $1,400, which is still pretty significant. And obviously you can see how that starts to add up over a 20-year time period. But your question about gas bills, it's a little bit complex, and you definitely hit on a strong point there. Gas bills in Chicago are really high, and they've been going up. In fact, the natural gas utility that serves Chicagoland, Peoples Gas, actually just filed a $402 million rate increase at the Illinois Commerce Commission, which is just bonkers. I mean, that essentially means that gas bills are likely to continue to increase in Chicago. And this is driven partly by the high cost of the gas commodity itself, that's being driven by external factors that are influencing supply and demand. And those external factors include things like, demand that's gone up as we have been transitioning sort of like in this hybrid phase of coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. And there's, more demand from consumers for a lot of different resources. Also, Putin's war in Ukraine, which is kind of cutting some of the gas reserves in the supply. All of those factors are making it so that gas prices are just skyrocketing all over the place. But in Chicago, gas bills are high, not just because of that, but also because of the excessive spending that Peoples has done on their system modernization program. So their system modernization program is essentially a program that they have to fund upgrades to the gas distribution system. And it's been something that they've been operating for quite some time, and it's really costly. So in fact, the Chicago Mayor's Office and the Attorney General and a local consumer advocate organization called the Citizens Utility Board actually just filed a joint statement responding to the rate increase that Peoples Gas is calling for. And in their joint statement, they note that more than half of that $402 million rate hike is to fund the utility spending on their system modernization program. And for years, the city, the Attorney General's office, consumer advocates have shared a deep concern about the program and its impacts on energy affordability for Chicago consumers. And as we're starting to think about what we need to do to address this climate crisis and to cut down on greenhouse gas emissions and also, improve the energy affordability situation in Chicago, it's probably time that we stop digging ourselves into a deeper hole by continuing to fund this type of program and upgrades to the gas distribution system, that aren't necessarily for reasons of safety purposes. For things that are outside of that scope, we should start looking for more affordable and sustainable alternatives to power our heating, cooking, and clothes drying needs in our homes.
Yes, I would love to think about like a 21st century vision, which is affordability, clean, healthier living conditions for future generations. And so, yeah, like this kind of strange modernization um sort of initiative that People's Gas is taking that didn't really take community input into consideration. I'm always all about, like, nothing about us without us, especially as a community activist. So yeah, I think that that's just really insane. And so I am convinced I want to try to electrify my home. Um, and so as others are starting to think about this, you've given us some good examples, especially about space heating. I'm thinking about that now. My gas bill is double the amount it's been in the past few years. And so, like, I'm cutting corners here. But it's like, why am I paying so much to kind of like live in a situation where it's not the healthiest to be raising my son and live with my family? And so if someone wants to electrify their home, how would they go about it? And where can we find more information about this process?
Yes, I'm really glad that you asked the question. And I think that the process would maybe look different depending on whether you're a homeowner versus a tenant. If you're a homeowner, you likely have more direct control over what modifications you could make to your home that would make it so you're able to electrify whatever appliances you're looking to electrify. And then existing buildings, every building is a bit unique, so it's going to have its own tailored solution. But it all will likely start with some sort of energy audit, just trying to get an understanding of what the condition of your home currently is. And that's something that your local electric utility will often offer, especially for eligible low income and moderate income households, and potentially even households outside of those income ranges. They'll offer free energy assessments for folks to be able to do that. And what will happen is either a contractor or service provider will come to a home. They'll assess, what is the current like condition of your home? What are the things that you might need to do to be able to get it into a state where you're able to swap out your gas appliance for an electric appliance. And that might include things like upgrading your electric service panel, potentially creating a bit more space maybe to make the appliance fit. And they'll be able to let you know all of that. And there's also lots of great like funding and resources to help cover those pre-electrification costs as well. And one program that I'm really excited about actually is I know that the local electric utility in Chicago, ComEd, is creating a whole home electrification program that is going to help convert low income single family and multifamily units to all electric appliances. This is a program that advocates had pushed the utility to pursue and have been working in collaboration with the utility to help them figure out, how they can properly structure this program. And I think the utility just announced this program just a couple of weeks ago, but it's a really exciting program. They're going to provide for participants that are part of this program, they'll provide a cost estimate for the pre-electrification measures that might be needed, also a cost estimate for the installation of the new appliance. Through this collaboration, ComEd and a local organization, Elevate, will work with other local contractors to deliver comprehensive appliance and HVAC upgrades, building weatherization, health and safety modifications, because those are also important measures to take even before you electrify, right? Like getting mold out of your home if that's something that you're experiencing. And so, this will really be like a whole home approach to help low-income customers electrify their households, which is really exciting. And it's going to happen, I think it's going to roll out first for 100 single and multi-unit homes in Chicago. And there's more information about this and other programs that the utility is going to offer on their home electrification page, which I'm happy to share with you after a conversation today. So that's a really great resource.
Yeah. Wow, that's so awesome. So I know at the federal level, like the Inflation Reduction Act was huge, and that, obviously has an impact on Chicago residents. And can you talk about what the Inflation Reduction Act incentives are that can help residents offset the cost of some of this equipment? It sounds like, you're gonna have to kind of swap a few things out. And so can you kind of walk us through where residents who are interested to find out more information about this, how they can access these savings and this equipment?
Yes, for sure. So the Inflation Reduction Act is really exciting. It's the biggest investment that the government has made into advancing clean energy solutions and measures. And one of the provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, as we call it, is these building electrification rebates and tax credits. So IRA offers households up to $14,000 through these rebates and upfront discounts to switch over to electric appliances. That covers up to 100% of the project costs for low-income households and about 0.5% of the project costs for moderate income households. For the remaining costs and for households who don't qualify for those upfront discounts, which are going to be through the rebates, IRA also includes major tax credits for electrification and energy efficiency upgrades. So you can help to pay for those remaining costs through some of those tax credits. Then it also offers some low cost financing, which will help to bring down the monthly and finance cost of electric equipment that's also to become widely available in the months ahead. So right now, the Department of Energy is developing guidance to states who want to access federal funds to implement the building electrification rebates in their state jurisdiction. So, we're still waiting on the guidance from DOE to see that, but at some point, states will be applying for this funding and state energy offices will be dictating how that funding will essentially flow down to the consumer level. So more updates to be provided on that. We can definitely have a follow-on conversation at some point. But for the meantime, I know that local consumer advocates like Citizens Utility Board, which I mentioned earlier, they've actually released a guide to the IRA for Illinois residents that kind of helps to demystify a bit of this. And I'm happy to provide you with the link for that as well. And then there's also a number of guides that have been created by other organizations at the national level, like Rewiring America's Go Electric, Your Guide to the IRA report, which is also going to be a really great resource for consumers to understand all of these savings opportunities that are kind of coming down to them to help electrify their homes. So happy to unpack that in a follow-on conversation. There's definitely a lot of exciting things to talk about.
Yeah, wow. So yeah, I'm gonna just shift a little bit, like really thinking about communities here in Chicago. I live on the southeast side, which is an environmental justice community. It's a low income community, predominantly of color. And so, what kind of impact could electrification have on low income residents and communities here?
So that's a really great question. I would say, first of all, because of the incentives that are coming from IRA and from utility incentives that are also part of utility energy efficiency plan filings. I know ComEd has a couple of building electrification incentives specifically earmarked for low income households. Because of these incentives, and because of the long-term energy efficiency savings that consumers can get by using efficient electric appliances in favor of their gas-powered counterparts, building electrification really stands to be a major cost savings opportunity for low-income homes, both in the short term because of the incentives that will help cover the cost of purchasing the appliances, but also in the long term because of the energy saving potential that I just mentioned. And outside of the cost savings that building electrification can have, it can also have a really positive impact on improving indoor air quality. for households that are disproportionately exposed to air pollutants, which, just happens to be the case in a lot of underserved communities, because of this pattern of historic disinvestment, and the siting of more industrial operations in those communities. I know that that's something that's very prevalent in Chicago. And, when we think about air pollution, we often think about the air outside, which is really important, but we don't always think about what our air quality is like within our own homes. But studies have shown that air inside our homes can sometimes be more polluted than outside air. And this is in part because many homes have gas burning stoves that release toxic pollutants into the air that we breathe. And a lot of homes may not have great filtering mechanisms. They might not have like a hood over a gas stove to help filter out some of those particles. And even if they did, there's still some particles that kind of will seep through into the air as well. So electrifying these and other appliances can really have a positive effect, I think, on indoor air quality, and by extension promote a healthier living environment for those living in the home. And that's very important for vulnerable populations and also for children and seniors that will be living in that are in homes as well, and may be more predisposed to developing respiratory illnesses like asthma.
Wow, yeah, totally on point. My last question is, and this has just been so informational and so life-changing. I can't wait to have everyone kind of listen to this, and we all have a lot of homework to do to try to implement these into our homes. But like thinking big picture here, why is this work so important? Not only for Chicago, but nationwide. We're always talking about climate. And so like, what will this electrification, building decarbonization in Chicago, do to help Chicago reach its climate goals?
Yes. So I'm really glad that you asked that question, because that's sort of the third topic that we haven't covered quite as much today. But commercial and residential buildings actually account for more than half of Chicago's economy carbon-wide emissions. And reducing carbon emissions in buildings, the old approach has been by reducing energy usage in buildings. So the idea is like less energy, that we use in buildings to achieve the same level of services that we want, the less carbon emissions that are associated with that. And while that is, a really important piece of the strategy, it's definitely not the full part of the strategy. And at some point, eliminating carbon emissions in buildings will have to deal with eliminating fossil fuel use in buildings, because fossil fuels produce carbon emissions. So building electrification, switching out these gas-powered appliances in our homes and buildings with efficient electric alternatives will help eliminate those on-site gas emissions. And you might be wondering, about the carbon emissions that might be associated with the electricity that is used to power those appliances. Well, we've seen in Illinois that carbon emissions from the electricity sector have consistently gone down in the past couple of years, and they're about to really, really ramp down because of the power sector provisions that were passed through the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. So there's a lot of wonderful commitments that CEJA has to a carbon-free power sector, I think by 2045. And that's just going to make it so carbon emissions from the electricity sector will go down even more than they already have. And our analysis found that we don't even really have to wait for that transition to happen to be able to cut carbon emissions through building electrification. We actually found that electrifying household appliances in Chicago, even in the near term, will cut carbon emissions on a net basis by as much as 30% just in the first year of electrification. So even electrifying your home today can really help to significantly cut down on carbon emissions. And over the course of the 20-year period that we looked at, we see carbon emissions cut down, by 50%, 70%. So we know that electrification is going to be really, really key to helping Chicago meet its climate action plan goal of 62% carbon emissions reductions by 2040. So it's the piece of the puzzle that we don't often talk about, but it is really critical and probably one of the only ways that Chicago is going to be able to reach that goal is if we electrify our building stock.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, this is amazing. I'm not sure if you have any questions for me, or if you want to kind of get my response. I feel like I've learned so much today. And just, yeah, my wheels are spinning about how to implement a lot of what I learned today in my community and through the work I do here in Chicago.
Yeah, no, I do have some questions for you. I'm really curious to know, what is kind of your overall reaction to learning about these findings and some of the things that we've talked about today? From your perspective, how does that kind of come across?
Yeah, so as a, community activist, I spend the majority of my time kind of fighting industry that's outside of my home. And, my home is my safe space where I seek refuge from the, particulate matter and pollutants that are emitted day in and out. And so I've never really quite thought about kind of like my gas stove having this huge impact on my health. I grew up with my mom having asthma. And I kind of vividly remember going to my grandparents' older home with a really old stove, and it always kind of consistently smelling like gas. And my mom being like very bothered with her asthma from that. And so like learning today, like how kind of detrimental like fossil fueled appliances are in your home really has me thinking about taking on some of these incentives, learning more to electrify like my dryer and my stove. And I mean, I kind of, my grandparents grew up in the Depression, so they did not have a gas dryer. They would line dry their clothes, like pretty sustainable, like shut off their lights and things like that. So I try to do that. But yeah, I mean, like I often smell like gas in my home. I live in an older two flat here in Chicago on the south side. So, I'm always kind of like wary about my appliances are old. So yeah, I mean, and I know that's the norm for a lot of community members here on the southeast side. Our median income is $46,000, which is the poverty level. So, I know that's a huge concern. Like I can't afford to buy new appliances. So to learn today that there are programs and rebates out there where this is more accessible. Accessibility is super huge here in the community because, you know, we want to be healthy, we want to be thriving, and we can't do that if we're constantly fighting day in and out to breathe clean air inside, and the same thing is happening within our homes. What's the point? It's like this circle that is never ending. So it's just so important that we're learning about this today, that you're out here like advocating and doing this analysis and pushing for this because it's something that I didn't realize is so desperately needed here in Chicago.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely, a lot of what you said resonates a lot with me. And, something I didn't really touch on, but it's just an important point, I think, to hammer home is that these incentives are really great because they're providing like upfront discounts for appliances that you're not going to get if you purchase a gas appliance. You're not going to get an $8,000 discount on your space heating appliance unless it's a heat pump. So, we have yet, to fully have these incentives kind of come all the way down to the community level. But, we're actively working in the process to make sure that when they do, they get implemented in the right way and go to the folks that really need, these incentives to be able to make that transition. But I want to ask another question, actually. I'm curious, based on what you said regarding, what the current situation is and the many challenges that your community on the southeast side faces, how could you see building electrification making an impact in your community?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of family members live paycheck to paycheck. So just some of the incentives that even within the first year, you would save hundreds to maybe $1,000, I think would have a huge impact. Like I stated before, my gas bill is the highest it's ever been. It's actually double the amount it was a few years ago. And I'm privileged enough to have, like a middle class job, but that is not the norm here on the Southeast side. We have what we call the low opportunity fund for children. And so that means it's a food desert, it's a transportation desert. We don't have healthcare centers. And then when you go inside your home and you realize, you might have outdated appliances, or, your gas bill's so high, like, children might, be living without heat here because they can't afford it. But if there's an opportunity to kind of switch out some of these things and give children and elderly a better quality of life that actually is impactful to their health and not detrimental, I think that that's amazing and it needs to be implemented. And it's something that I think a lot of community activists would really stand behind here in my community. And so, yeah, it's just about socializing this. I mean, like, there's a monopoly, like you just hear people's gas and you're like, this is what I have to do for my home. This is how it's always been. And so like to have this forward way thinking that we can, electrify, even in small ways, just starting at the appliance level, I think is just like super awesome. And I can't wait to just talk about this and shout it at the mountaintops, because our communities deserve sanctuary within our home, because so often, we're living in fear of what we're breathing. There's asthma vans that are set up outside of our Chicago public schools because so many children have, higher disproportionate rates of asthma here. And so to hear that, like, their living conditions are not the greatest because of, we're living off fossil fuels. Whatever I can do to kind of like move this forward. I think that this is just like the opportunity is here. We have this funding, we have these rebates. There's no better time than now.
Yeah, no, you put it so beautifully, Gina, and wow, you just like touched on so many things. And something that you said, I mean, it's just crazy to imagine some people having to choose, or, to live without space heating in Chicago. Chicago's known for being so cold, and there was just this major polar vortex that just happened in the Midwest. I mean, it's hard to fathom that some people are having to make those choices or just don't have those options available to them either. So this is, it's a really serious issue, like the quality of our homes and, access to affordable heating. That's a big issue that is not always talked about. And is there a lot of awareness or discussion about building electrification in your community, or, like heating affordability and things like that?
There isn't really, like, especially in my environmental justice community, we're so reactive to all of the kind of bad actors that are kind of compounding on us day in and out. It's really just like this whack-a-mole approach we have to battling industry. And so this is actually an opportunity to be proactive and to think about, what does a healthy vision look like for our community that will impact not only our health, but our pocketbooks. And so I think that, environmental justice communities are building more capacity, as these emerging Gen Z, climate aware generations are thinking about this. I think that they want to take this proactive approach. They've seen their families, suffer from asthma and other sort of health impacts. And if they can, kind of take on these opportunities to impact the health of their home and create like a healthy living situation, that they'll do it. And so it's not something that's talked about. Unfortunately, there's a lot more work to be done, but like, it's amazing that there's tools out there. And that's why we're having this conversation today, because sometimes it can get a little bit wonky. I mean, I myself am just sort of like, what? But like, you're doing such an amazing job. Like, humanizing this, because this is a real human life issue. Like, we don't have to, give up our health
Yeah.
industry or for, utilities. And so this is just a really forward way of thinking about a healthy future for Chicagoans. So I'm just so excited to have this conversation today. And there's just a lot more socializing and educating that we need to do. And so this is just the first step of many conversations.
Yes. Wow. Well, Gina, I second everything that you said. And I'm really glad that we had this conversation today and that we've been able to unpack it. It's just I feel so, grateful to have had this chat with you and to talk a bit about this and, to also hear a little bit about like how these findings resonate with you and how you are kind of applying or, thinking about their significance to your real lived experience in Chicago and what positive impacts that could have. And certainly there should never have to be a trade-off between, meeting your energy needs and your health. That just should be something that's not even part of the discussion. So that resonates certainly a lot with me. And yeah, I'm just really grateful for this conversation. Thanks for having it with me.
Me too. Well, the next time we talk, hopefully we'll have some sort of case studies on how this is being successfully implemented. So, we're going to keep up the fight. We'll keep up with you and we'll start, educating all of Chicagoans about the importance of this work. So thank you so much, Valeria. And
Yeah.
to be continued.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.